Call the September 19th, 2018 Planning Commission hearing to order. Heather, we call the roll.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Schaller?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Ms. Macbeth?
Here.
Mr. Klee?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Before we start our business, I would like to first off thank David Julian, who had to resign from his position here on the Planning Commission, but also welcome Caleb Rogers, our new colleague, who I have had the wonderful experience of working with both EDA and as a student at the college. So please, thank you, welcome, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Our first order of business is approval of several sets of minutes. We're going to be looking at approving the minutes of our regular meeting from June 20th, our work session from July 25th, and our work session of August 22nd. Are there any additions or corrections to those three sets of minutes? Someone move that we accept them as presented?
So moved. Second.
Heather?
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Abstain.
We have one item on the consent agenda, the Union Baptist Church church addition. Is there anyone who wants to remove that from the consent agenda, or can we move forward?
Oh, looks good to me.
Well, then I would move that we accept the consent agenda as presented to us. Is there a second?
Second.
Heather?
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, this moves us to our public hearings. The first public hearing is a combined public hearing, I'm assuming, PCR 18-019 and 020, the request of Vicarious Beer to amend the zoning ordinance to add amusement arcade, and the request of Vicarious Beer to have a special use permit to operate the restaurant with the amusement arcade. Aaron, I see you're up at the bat, so let's...
Vicarious Beer, LLC is proposing to operate a restaurant, microbrewery, and amusement arcades at 110 South Henry Street in a space formerly occupied by Seasons and Stefano's restaurants in the Henry Street shops. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning ordinance to allow amusement arcades with a special use permit in the downtown business district, B1, and the second part of the request is for a special use permit to operate a microbrewery with amusement arcade containing approximately 20 games, and the proposed ordinance was attached to your packages. The applicant is proposing to operate a 9,700 square foot restaurant, microbrewery, and amusement arcade. A portion, approximately 2,000 square feet of the restaurant, will house the microbrewery. The enclosed floor plan indicates the restaurant space, which will include a live entertainment area, microbrewery, patio space, and amusement arcade. And the applicant's statement was attached to your packages as well. The 2013 comprehensive plan designates this parcel as a downtown commercial land use, which is defined in the plan as a land use category that is intended to promote a variety of business uses in the downtown planning area and includes Merchant Square and other predominantly retail business areas adjacent to the Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area and the College of William and Mary. Land to the north, south, and west are designated downtown commercial land use as well, and properties to the east are designated as the Colonial Williamsburg Historic. This property, along with the properties north, south, and west, are designated Downtown Business District B1 in the zoning ordinance. Lands to the east are designated as CW, Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area. The B1 district reads that this district is established to promote a harmonious development and redevelopment in the downtown business area adjacent to Colonial Williamsburg District and the College of William and Mary. The regulations are designed to maintain and encourage the existing small-scale pedestrian character of this area and to encourage a harmonious mixture of commercial, residential, office, and institutional uses. The Architectural Review Board reviewed this application on their September 11, 2018 meeting and conceptually approved the proposed exterior changes. The Site Plan Review Committee did not have a quorum, but the member present was in support of this project. This property is located in the downtown parking district, which does not require off-street parking for non-residential uses and is adequately served by essential essential public services such as streets, drainage facilities, fire protection, public water and sewer facilities. The zoning ordinance encourages a pedestrian-scale environment in this area and permits restaurants by right, microbreweries with a special use permit. The addition of amusement arcades with a special use permit will provide a unique experience for the city. This proposed project is in harmony with the adopted comprehensive plan and the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. The proposed use is in harmony with the character of the adjacent properties and will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be of significant ecological, scenic, or historic importance. The project is also designed and sited so that it will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development or use of adjacent properties in the surrounding neighborhood. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of the text change to add amusement arcades to the downtown business B1 district with a special use permit as detailed in the attached ordinance, and the approval of the special use permit for Precarious Beer LLC to operate a microbrewery with an amusement arcade at this location with the conditions outlined in my memo. I'm available if you have any questions, and the applicant and the applicant's representative are also present.
Does anyone have any questions of Aaron at this time? Okay, then I will open the public hearing, and I don't have a gavel, so here we go. And if the applicant or the representative wants to speak first at the public hearing, happy to hear.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Singley. I'm a commercial real estate broker with RJS and Associates, whose offices are located across the street at 423 North Boundary Street here in the city of Williamsburg. Our firm represents Precarious Beer LLC in the leasing of 9,700 square feet of commercial space located in the Henry Street shops, which are owned by the Clean Williamsburg Foundation. Here with me today are the owners of Precarious Beer, Chris Cook, Andrew Voss, and also Jeff Duncan from the Clean Williamsburg Foundation is present. We feel that Ms. Burke's done an excellent job in summarizing the project and providing an overview of the proposed business. I think at this time it would be helpful if Andrew Voss could come up and just give the members of the Planning Commission a little bit further insight on the business operations of the proposed project.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to Aaron and the rest of the city staff for their support through the application process. I think it's important to point out that the Precarious Beer Hall that we're working on is intended to bring a mixed entertainment venue to the downtown district. We've seen a lot of great support and success with Amber Ox. Amber Ox, though, we have noticed over the last 6+ months that our business has evolved in much more of a restaurant setting, which, albeit phenomenal, has also kind of adjusted what our model is. We've also seen a lot of great success on the brewery side as well with Precarious Beer and the demand for Precarious Beer, both in Williamsburg as well as the outside areas of Williamsburg. So we were kind of challenged to find a space that we could look to expand. We love the city, we love the support we've seen so far, and we do feel like the current space that we're looking at in the old Seasons and Stefano space is really both underdeveloped as it sits vacant in such a great location in town, and also leads really all of the aspects to a successful mixed entertainment venue and expansion of our brewery space, with the loading dock area in the back. So we went through the application process, and the biggest thing with this concept is it is not, I guess with the special use permit, what this project is not going to be is it's not going to be an arcade, I guess, for lack of a better term. This isn't something you would see, walking down the Jersey Shore Boardwalk, that there's this little seedy arcade off to the side. This is going to be the arcade component here. We're looking anywhere between a dozen games to up to 20 games, depending on the amount of space we have inside. And the intention of those games, they're vintage arcade games, the intention is essentially guest retention. It provides an entertainment value to it without being like a destination arcade. It's just one additional step in creating kind of a true I guess, American beer hall feel. The space itself is going to be essentially opened up. We're going to remove the ceiling, so from a design standpoint, we'll bring the natural character of what was the original firehouse, and then the post office kind of back expose some of those great features, and then have a large communal beer hall experience inside where it'll be fun, it'll be casual. And then the production brewing side of the business for Precarious is about the 2,200 square feet, and that just gives us enough space to be able to expand our brewing efforts. We've got a little 700 square foot space in Amber Rocks if you've been in, and we have been out of space pretty much since day one. So this concept essentially gives us the ability to kind of grow as a company. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the project.
Does anyone have any questions?
If I may, out of curiosity, do you envision all ages being able to come in and play the arcade games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the intention of this space is to be welcoming to all. We do realize the arcade adds an aspect that the younger demographic, the kids of that nature, would be interested in. If you've been to a lot of the local breweries around, one thing I think breweries are challenged with, and I think from a tasting room design strategy standpoint moving forward, as you've seen a lot of new breweries come on, adding an element of entertainment for the kids is a really big thing, and it has been a big push, because that as parents want to come out, they bring their kids to these breweries. Kids tend to, if they don't have any way to consume their time, end up running circles around everybody else's table that when there's individuals there trying to entertain it. But the intention is not going to, it's a brewery it's a beer hall, so we're not necessarily going to be interested in having groups of 10, 12, 13-year-olds hanging out playing the arcade games either. There will be a requirement of essentially consumption. You can't just come in and just pop tokens in machines and play without enjoying the rest of the true beer hall concept. So,
But what's to prevent a group of 12-year-olds coming in and hanging out in the beer hall all day around a beer hall?
Internal policies for consumption. At the end of the day, if we require consumption of beer and food while they're there, and they're interested in just popping quarters in, as a private business, we certainly, can set policies up to prevent that. Because what we don't want this to turn into is that arcade setting. That has never been the intention.
Right. But certainly they would be able to come in and drink sodas and eat French fries and play the arcade games.
I suppose in theory, sure.
Okay. And are you thinking that they'll feed quarters or tokens in there?
It will be tokens.
You mentioned vintage
Yes, sir. Yep.
Arcades.
Yeah, so all of the box games we're looking at partnering with a company that it's based out of Richmond. They manage a few other arcade kind of settings in that area, kind of the barcade concept, for lack of a better term. And all of the games that tend to be what are popular now are the Asteroids, Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, kind of the vintage style arcade games, as well as pinball games and things like that. So, it's not going to be the mixed entertainment boxes that you can select one of 60 games. We're not going to have the motorcycle games that you can ride on with, or all of those versions, or the shoot 'em games. It's going to be literally one joystick, kind of that vintage style.
So vintage is being what we played in college.
Some of you younger people play those.
Not exactly sure what you mean by we played in college, because we have an array of
Whatever.
yes.
But at any rate, okay, are there other questions?
I think it's a straightforward and exciting.
Yeah, I think that you all, having seen you through EDA and Planning Commission with Amber Rocks and some of the public events you've hosted over the past time with Amber Rocks, I think you've shown that you're able to produce a class act in what you're doing. So obviously we need to discuss this, but I don't have any questions or concerns about the arcade aspect of it.
Sure.
It seemed like it was part of this broader theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the support. Again, we are absolutely interested in this space being essentially a visual extension of Amber Rocks as far as a concept from a design and a build-out standpoint. Certainly there's going to a lot of money being invested in the space itself to provide a classy environment to hang out. So we appreciate the support. Thank you.
So we do have an open public hearing going. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and speak to the commission on anything regarding this project? Please come forward. Come forward, please state your name.
Good afternoon. My name is...
Can you come to this? This is being recorded and televised, believe it or not, so people like to hear.
Is this on? All right. Hello, my name is Lou Candell. I'm a resident of the city, and I have a question or two regarding this proposed establishment. I think that although a good argument could be made that there are already a sufficient number of beer drinking establishments in the city of Williamsburg. My question really centers on this arcade. I don't have this clear in my mind yet. This arcade is located in a common area where the beer hall is located? There's no separation?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see on the rendering. Essentially off of, this area right here, as you can see, there's 5 small box games. There's a section of kind of couch seating up here, and then a section of seating along this wall. There's the 5 small games right here. There's a section of seating here with a little bit of couches and stuff here.
All right.
And then there's what represents 5 pinball machines right here. That's along a wall that runs, that'll be covered in windows that'll look back into the brewery space. So it's an extension as it relates from a design standpoint. We're not going to have, this is Henry Street here, this is Francis Street down here. From the exterior looking in, you literally have to walk into the space and work into the back of the area back here to be able to see the arcade and where it's positioned within the space.
All right. Well, let me ask this. Is there any physical barrier between the arcade area and the beer drinking area? I mean, is it possible to simply walk from the arcade area into the, for lack of a better term, the bar?
There is one contiguous space, yeah. It is. There is no barriers that define the 2 spaces.
Uh-huh. I see. Well, I haven't lived in Williamsburg all my life, but it seems to me then that there's no state or local regulation that prohibits underage minors from being in areas where alcohol is served?
Unaccompanied by adults, I would have to look into the regulations by the state agency, like
Well, our city attorney is shaking her head, so I take that.
Not to physically be present, there are certainly requirements that underage persons not consume alcohol, and it's the property owner, business owner's obligation to ensure that that happens.
Well, my first thought is that if underage minors are allowed to mingle all areas of this establishment, it probably won't be too long before some of them figure out how to get beer. This is my concern. If they're, I have to say it, I'm not fond of the idea of a gaming arcade that's going to attract a lot of preteens and teenagers. But, without some means of preventing underage minors from coming into the bar area, as I said, I think it's a bad plan as it stands. I think that more consideration ought to be given to it. I don't have anything more to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to come forward and speak to the commission on this matter? Seeing no one, I have my magical gavel. There we go. Okay, so we have this item in front of us. So is there any discussion or comments that anyone would like to make with regard to this?
I think this will be a really excellent addition to Merchant Square. It'll enliven things quite a bit. I fully support it.
I think the gentleman's point is well taken about minors and the serving of beer and that sort of thing, but I had an email from somebody, I don't know if y'all got the same one, that said the kids are not going to be interested in this because they play all their games on their phones now. So I think we've got kind of a range of opinions on that, and it's certainly up to the, as our city attorney said, it's certainly up to the owners to enforce that law, and I think we believe that they're going to do their best to do it.
I would also imagine that beer at the $7 price range is going to prevent a lot of minors from being interested in trying to purchase through a friend or something the beer. So I think between the regulations that are already in place and sort of the economics of being a preteen, I don't think it's going to be a huge concern, but it's something worth noting and discussing, like you said.
I agree with that point as well. From my understanding, restaurants that have different price points are usually complementary to others around them, so I think it'll bring an incredible aspect to Merchant Square. I do share your concern, though, Luke, and without dipping too much into the business side of things, you mentioned that there would be playing through tokens rather than quarters, and there might be a way to encourage someone to buy a beer or a taco and then receive access to those tokens before you're allowed to play the arcade games.
And I am also quite supportive of this and appreciate your comments. And, we do live in a college town, and obviously a large number of the college students are underage. And at different times when there have been concerns, at a certain time of the evening, they start carding people who are coming through. I mean, there's different ways that the management of a business can self-regulate to ensure that they're doing the right thing and it's successful as well. I also see this as something that, with my own family, that we can go to something like this and the kids can get a handful of tokens and be within 15 feet of us and that. So, I don't think we want to put restrictions that after 6 o'clock you have to be over 18 because then you can't have the kids over there within eyesight playing the games and we're over here having our dinner. So I think that that's more... they know the ABC rules. They want to stay in business. They don't want to have a fine. They're going to have to keep track of that. That's their business. So.
I think the business is going to have to be diligent in figuring out great systems for it. I like arcades and I like beer, and I think it's a good idea. And I think that there are a number of young people who are not 12 and 13, but 18, 19, and 20 who want to go and hang out with their friends, and this gives them something to do other than just drink. A venue where they can eat something and be involved is a good idea. How you deal with the possible groups of 12 and 13-year-olds that want to come in and hang out, price point is probably a good way of dealing with that. But I remember when I was that age, there was just not enough to do in this town, so that's a different element. And I hung out in the post office sometimes because the post office.
Still the post office.
Still the post office. So I think you've got a nice track record in what you're doing on Prince George Street, and I think it's a good concept. And you'll just have to be diligent in policing that. Dave & Buster's, this is not a Dave & Buster's, but they've found a way to manage that and have some arcade activity for people to do something other than just drink. So my hat's off to you for that.
So I only had a question about the ordinance and the itemized use of amusement arcades being permitted. And the basic question is, I think I know the answer. I just want to make sure that we've talked this through and all understand what we're doing. Do we need a definition of what an amusement arcade is? And I ask the question for two reasons. One is I don't think that's obvious on the face of it what an amusement arcade is. And then the other is, suppose retros wanted to put in a pinball machine because they thought that would help their business. Does that qualify as an amusement arcade, or is that simply them just providing a single amenity? And if it's just providing an amenity, which is what I would expect, just as a reasonable person, at what point does 1 or 2 or 3 pinball machines become an amusement arcade and a use that requires a special use permit?
Amusement arcade is defined in the city code.
Did I miss it?
It's not in that ordinance, in the definition section of the city code, in the zoning ordinance. And as to your second question, I agree with you. That would be an incidental use, not the use of the property.
Right.
If someone installed a pinball machine, but it was a restaurant that just happened to have a pinball machine in the lobby, I would not think that would be a change in use.
Right. So because we're up in the 10 range here, we're beyond an incidental use.
It has to be 2 or more.
2 or more. Great. Thank you. Sorry, I should have looked at that beforehand. Thank you.
No, thanks, Jeff. Okay, I think everyone has had some comments on this item in front of us. Does anyone wish to make a motion? And if so, please be mindful of the fact that there are some staff recommendations that should be carried forward if we wish them to be.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application and recommend it to City Council, and that we include the staff recommendations that it is issued only to precarious beer and shall not be transferable, no more than 25 amusement arcades games on the premises, and a final site plan to be approved patio expansion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Heather?
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So our next item on our agenda is PCR 18-017, zoning ordinance update to get us into code with Virginia Code.
Yes. At its 2018 session, the Virginia General Assembly enacted House Bill 796 that mandates amendments to the City of Williamsburg zoning ordinance regarding administration to comply with the requirements of state and federal laws regarding persons with disabilities. Specifically, the following sections of the zoning ordinance require updating. Section 21.1, the purpose and intent to update a cross-reference to the Virginia Code. 2126, administration and enforcement to allow for reasonable modification to property or improvements that may be granted subject to expiration when no longer needed. And Section 2197, powers and duties of the Board of Zoning Appeals by adding the granting of a variance language for persons with disabilities and expiration when no longer needed. Therefore, staff recommends that Planning Commission recommend to City Council adoption of the proposed ordinance regarding administration to comply with the requirements of state and federal laws regarding persons with disabilities as required by H. Bill 796.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have questions, Carolyn, on this?
Could you just explain to us a little bit what the intent of the new of the changes are? I mean, obviously to get us in compliance, but what is the state actually asking us to do? I read this 2 or 3 times and couldn't quite get my head around it.
I think they were looking at persons with disabilities differently and trying to make sure that those laws and regulations got enacted into your local regulations, and I think Chris may be able to help me a little bit with that one since it's
So
your code.
the Board of Zoning Appeals effectively has the ability to do this now. This just mandates that they do it. So if someone needs to put a handicapped ramp, a disability access ramp on their house, and it encroaches in the setback, it's a hardship, which means they can grant it, but this would essentially require them to grant it. But then after the use is no longer needed, it would have to come off the house. So it creates a temporary type of use. And it allows for those types of reasonable modifications outside the context of a variance. I have a hard time thinking about what those would be. This is not something where someone's going to be able to engage in an industrial use in a residential neighborhood, but it allows for staff to determine that there is a reasonable modification that needs to be made to a zoning rule in order to assist someone who has a disability.
Okay. The word that jumped out at me was shall. Such request shall be granted, and you've just explained why that's in here. So it's no longer a judgment call.
What's reasonable is still going to be the part where there's a judgment call, right?
Yeah,
so
okay.
Again, they're not going to require that we change a residential use into an industrial use, but there may be times when, say, a home occupation that's slightly more intense that someone who's engaged in, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, we might have to allow in that particular area. In almost every case, this is going to be in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah. So I guess, in short, in practice, this isn't going to change anything about what the Board of Zoning Appeals is doing. Thank you.
Right, and for me, I guess in reading the preamble, I guess I was thinking that this was going to modify it so as to make it easier for someone with a disability just through staff approval to get something like a handicap ramp. They still have to go to BZA and pay the fees and all that to go
If it
through that
requires
process?
a variance, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so this is a matter that has a public hearing with it, so I will open the public hearing if anyone wishes to come forward on this item. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? Then I'll take a motion.
I move that we recommend approval. Sorry, I've lost the. I move that we recommend approval of PCR 18-017 to make our. That's it. To recommend approval of PCR 18-017.
Second.
Heather?
Mr. Granger,
Aye.
Mr. Schaller,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth,
Aye.
Mr. Klee,
Aye.
Mr. Boswell,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
We're going to be moving PCR 18-018 to our October agenda. So now we have an open forum. If anyone would like to come forward and speak to the commission on any topic that is in front of us, welcome to do so. Seeing no one, I will close the open forum. We have no site plans or subdivisions or unfinished business. I do have new business in that Caleb Rogers is a new member and needs a committee assignment, so the low-hanging fruit is to start on the site plan committee, so I'll add you to that committee list.
I went this morning.
You went this morning, actually? Oh, fantastic, I didn't, but now you're officially a member versus an observer or something like that, but at any rate, very good, that's great. We have our information items and all in our packet. Next Wednesday, we have our monthly work session, September 26th. This month, our work session will be a housing forum that will be moderated by a facilitator, so it is an opportunity for us to hear what the community is interested in sharing with us. It's really a listening session for the Planning Commission, which means that it can't be a listening session for the Planning Commission unless you all come, so please attend. It will be here from 4 to 6 a week from today. And then we do have an October 17th hearing that already has on our agenda 4 items listed on it, so keep posted for that item as well. So I will end the Planning Commission hearing unless any further things, so we are adjourned. Thank you.